Hi, everyone. I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theater. And today we're so fortunate to be joined by the team behind the wonderful new series, I Hate Suzie. We have the wonderful Prebble, who's the writer, co-creator, and executive producer, and Billie Piper, who's the actress, co-creator, and executive producer. And I wanted to start by asking a little bit about the genesis of the series, because I know that the two of you kind of concocted the idea of coming up with a series. And then Lucy, when you were writing the first scripts, that there were a few different versions and different angles that you were taking in terms of what the voice of the show was going to be. So I wanted to ask kind of what that journey was and how you ultimately landed on what the final voice of the show was with this central character.
Luce, do you want to take it this time?
Sure. Yeah. So we had talked for quite a while about the idea of doing a show together and what that would be. And we both knew that, I think one of the things that we wanted was what Billie challenged me to think about was, what sort of show would you write or would we create together if we could do whatever we wanted? So rather than how you often start in television, which is thinking what can get made, or even, you know, what does someone else come to you with? The challenge was, well, what if we could actually do something that we would like? What would that look like? And that's a really fun place to start from, because you sort of go, oh yeah, what do I like actually? What would I like to see? Rather than sort of imagining some other audience. So we would talk about stuff that we would love to see, you know, that we'd never seen before represented, particularly about women and about the lives of women that we knew and just stuff that we were coming up with. And it took a while, you know, we started from quite a grounded place. We were writing about a friendship between these two women, but to me, it didn't have enough like kind of force or gesture behind it. I was always looking for the big idea. And then eventually I came to Bill and I said, listen, what if it's this? What if it's a woman whose life kind of falls apart in unexpected ways after she's hacked? Because I'd always wondered what had happened to those women who had their private materials stolen, you know, professionally, but also personally and emotionally. And I thought it was a very good metaphor for some of the stuff that we were talking about, which was being exposed in your 30s as a person, like, who actually am I? What do I want? How have I been behaving up till now? And so we were quite keen on that as a big idea. And then we went into a room together and like a writer's room and just came up with stuff, put it on the walls, talked through what could happen. And the more that we spoke, the more that we challenged each other to be really, really honest. And I don't mean personal. I actually mean more the challenge. I would sometimes write something and show it to Billie, and occasionally something about it, she would say, yeah, you know, it's good, but it's a bit telly. And what she meant by that was, well, she can say what she meant, but like, it's the sort of thing you see on screen a lot, but you don't really experience in life. And we were quite keen for our show to be the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And in terms of the emotional journey that she goes on, that was one of the aspects that I wanted to ask you about, Billie, because in terms of your performance and the spaces that you go, it isn't just the case that there's an emotional arc that happens throughout an episode. You know, it goes to about 7 different places within a very short scene. And that's one of the reasons that it works so well. And so I wanted to ask you about the ways in which that created a unique challenge for you in the places that you needed to access as a performer, but also the tools that you had at your disposal from being part of the creation process with the series and with this character and knowing her so intimately ahead of time.
Yeah, I think it was an entirely different experience for me as an actor, because I'd worked with Lucy from the ground up, and I was so heavily invested for so many reasons. But also I know, love and trust Lucy both as a friend, but on set what felt really important was as a professional. So that allowed me a lot of freedom, and I know our tastes are so similar, so I could do things or try things or experiment with things that felt maybe more courageous than I would before, because I knew my love and friend and professional hero was there and may well be sharing the same sort of instincts. That's a really great feeling. I think the fact that each episode was something we felt quite keen to do was having these sort of standalone episodes that felt like small little films. Yeah, it meant that you could have this sort of emotional arc in these episodes, and it was really satisfying. It was really thrilling because it feels like it moves at a great lick, and that's something I felt really determined to achieve with the show. I spoke to Lucy, and we've talked about it in the past, about how it's so easy to be distracted when you watch TV now, because we always have our phone on our person, and you know it's a horrible addiction and preoccupation, and it's so easy to dip into your phone whilst you watch things, and I am guilty of that. So anything that feels like it can hold my attention feels it's quite fresh and quite bold, and I really wanted that for our show, which is why certainly the first 2 episodes feel like a panic attack, and the way it was shot feels very immersive, and again knowing that that's what we wanted to achieve with our director, knowing that you're all going towards the same goal is really thrilling in the making of it. It's really satisfying, a really satisfying experience.
Yeah, I love that you use the word immersive to describe kind of what that experience is as we go inside what is that panic attack and dealing with the anxiety and emotional fallout. And you do it in so many different ways throughout the seasons, including breaking the fourth wall. And so I was really interested for both of you in terms of how you thought about the way that you wanted to create that experience as being so immersive, because it's everything from the way that it's written to the performance to the way that it's directed, with a lot of those very extreme close-ups and what we're seeing on screen. So how did you think about those scenes beyond just being a portrayal, but really being an experience for the audience?
I mean, I think Lucy and I have talked a great deal about anxiety, and everyone certainly around me seems to be struggling with that, and we were quite keen for that to be represented in the show, and for it to be quite a sensory experience.
Yeah, and
Go
also
on,
what anxiety is, to some extent, is when your inner state is not congruent with your outer state. You'll see it in those early scenes with Suzie, where we're very, you know, so all those decisions are being made to create that feeling. But you need to be that close on a face in order to see the difference between what somebody is thinking and feeling and what they're expressing. And in this case, with Billie's performance, that's again in tune with that, because what Billie can do that's really unusual is, as you say, rather can go through a huge number of emotions in a very short amount of time and show them all to you just with the eyes, you know, without having to do very much. And that's an unusual skill, but you need to be quite close to catch it.
yeah.
So the camera's very close in order to show you the difference between what she's expressing, which is the, you know, grimace smile, and what she's feeling, which is the terror and guilt of what's going on. And it's in that lack of congruence, it's in that difference between the two that you find the anxiety. So I think that those things are all working together. The closeness of the camera, Billie's performance, but also the writing, in the sense of where there aren't words, or where there are very few words, or where those words are quite tripped up. So because Billie and I have worked on the show together from the beginning, not only does she know exactly where all of those lines and story points have come from, she also probably even knows what thought process what I was drawing from in order to create them as a person and as a writer, you know, from my life, from other people's lives, from anecdotes. So she doesn't need, in the way that I might write for a different actor, she doesn't need like several lines to get her to that point. She can do it in a glance between a broken line, you know, or no line at all. So I write for her differently than I would for other actors, and also that writing, that camera work, and the performance are all trying to create that massive intensity or immersion that you're describing, which is when the actor's completely in tune with the writing and the audience is completely in tune with the performance, and that's difficult to maintain, you know.
Yeah. You know, and to that point of your performance, Billie, where you can really just kind of like capture those moments between the lines, one of the things that's really striking is very frequently after you finish a line delivery, there's almost a pause, and then we get about 2 or 3 different internal flashes from your performance. And so I was interested in kind of your collaborative relationship with Georgie Banks-Davis, who was directing the show, and how the two of you worked together to have those quiet moments where you just allow the camera to sit on a scene for a little bit longer to capture that at the end so frequently.
She's the queen of that. She loves letting the camera roll and roll and roll. And quite often I imagine that those responses of me just going, come on, or, you know, they're probably quite truthful responses to the fact that we're going on a bit. But what I really liked about Georgie, when we met her, and we sort of met her having met quite a few directors and not quite finding our match, I liked the way she talked about, well, every episode felt quite different in the way that she was imagining them, and that's exactly what we wanted to achieve. And just the way she wanted to put Suzie centre frame for a lot of the first episodes, that you're literally, or you can literally smell her breath. You know what I mean? It's that intense. And Lucy and I were always going on and on about more close-ups, more close-ups. We were in that sort of John Cassavetes style, because it does so much work, and when you want to get inside someone's head, that seems to be the best way to do it. I get so bored feeling so far away from characters, and certainly for something like this, it felt necessary and well achieved by Georgie. But yeah, those little moments at the end are her just probably rolling on, and me having to come up with new ideas.
And also, you know, not to be too theatre pretentious about it, but there are moments where Georgie was quite good, I think, and then also our other director, Anthony Nielsen, who comes from a theatre background, at creating the environment that is very similar to what's happening in the scene. So particularly there's a hotel room scene in episode 2 in Denial, which is very, very debauched, and you know, you're supposed to feel quite uncomfortable about how grimy it's got, and it's supposed to have that feeling of going on and on for hours and hours, and people are trying to hold the last of the party in their hands, but it's slipping away from them as you begin to feel the bird song come in and go, oh God, that feeling. And so, you know, we were shooting that, and Georgie was very good at creating a state of freedom for the actors, and making you know, making it run on and making it feel very, very loose and a tiny bit dangerous, and keeping that space very private. So, you know, it's obvious stuff. You sort of want to create the same atmosphere on set as you are trying to capture on the camera. That's what, you know, part of what directing is. But it's actually quite hard to do. It's really difficult to do when you're trying to shoot loads and loads of different things during a day. It would be fine if you're only doing one of those during the day, but you're often doing sort of 6, 7, 8. And so, yeah, it's a talent.
Yeah. Lucy, I also wanted to ask you a little bit about the development of the character Cobb, who is Susie's husband in the show, because, you know, he's so richly developed, even when we don't necessarily know all of the specific details of kind of how they got together and what his upbringing was and what his family life was. You really kind of sense that and feel that in the character regardless. But there's also such an interesting choice in that we kind of perceive him one way at the beginning, and then we start to see a little bit of his anger unravel in different aspects of him and how he deals with and conveys his emotions. And so I wanted to ask also specifically about the choice you made and how you kind of arced that out and gradually revealed those details to us.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, thank you very much, because I always worry a little bit about parts like that, because you know, writing men is a thing. It's I have a lot of experience of men, but I'm also not a man, and you want to get things right and be textual. I always had a fair bit of sympathy for Cobb. I sort of feel like on set I was often the one who was like most understanding of his point of view. A lot of people are quite judgmental of the character, and I'm less so. When we cast Daniel Ings, it was very much a situation where we saw immediately that he could bring it to. One thing that fascinated me was so many of the actors that we saw for the part brought a kind of comic take on him as a husband, or as an angry man, or as a there was always a commentary on his hypermasculinity, which is not my experience. Like, it was almost like they were afraid to go to actually, or didn't have it in them to be men with a lot of anger, because it is very, very frowned on. It has this toxic masculinity label on it now. It's very difficult for men to be in touch with their anger without feeling guilty about it. And I think that Dan, did an audition, and we sort of thought, yeah, he can do that, and he does it brilliantly. And I guess what I was looking to do, not even consciously, but I think now I watch the series, I was interested in the way in which, in my experience, I have certainly had moments in my life where I've been struck by how, if you get mugged or something, I've got mugged and I've told a boyfriend at the time, and their reaction is to want to kill the mugger. And to be fair, and I was always sort of struck by that misalignment of maybe what you're looking for at that moment with what in this instance their natural feeling was. And I sort of thought maybe there's a journey in this show for Cobb to look at how the greater kind of misogyny or sexism or imbalance that's at play that affects why it is that Suzie gets hacked in the first place, how it affects her career, how it affects her personal life. Actually, you can bring it right down also to a marriage. You can bring it right down to a personal domestic setup, which is deeply affected by these issues of misogyny, sexism, dominance, power, fear. And I feel for both of them. I feel for Suzie and for Cobb personally, but I also completely understand how actually this isn't a very good marriage, and that has been revealed and exposed by the hacking.
Yeah. And in terms of performance wise, I wanted to ask you a little bit about working with Dan, Billie, because, that first episode, we come straight into a relationship and a marriage that has all this history at a moment of disarray. So we don't get the opportunity to kind of see how they were together before. But the way that you capture it, even through those very early scenes, is bringing such a deep storied history. So I was interested in kind of the conversations that the two of you had together and the work that you did to be able to bring it to that place right from the very first scene in the show.
We didn't actually get a lot of time together to do rehearsals. I think I was ill or something, so we didn't get a lot of time together, and often I think that can be really good, but it's also quite frightening. I suppose Lucy and I were really keen, and had to really keep an eye on not showing the dark, the pain, the boredom, the frustration, the imbalance of their relationship in those early scenes. So there's somewhere that you can go, and what's true about life is those things are, well, more often than not there, but they're very subtle, but they're very poisonous, and they're very toxic. And I think we just kept a really close eye on that as a team. Because what I love about Dan is Dan wasn't afraid of playing an arsehole. He actually really wanted to blow the top off of that, and seemed quite married to the idea of exposing men and those issues. But he was quite keen to do it very quickly, and it was like we had to it had to be very much a sort of slow, steady grind. Which he could do brilliantly because he's an absolutely brilliant actor.
And it's a really, really good performance. And like I said, quite rare, because I think it's difficult to get men to, I think often they want to play, they want to know that someone's a villain and they're playing a bad guy, or not do that and sort of find the sweetness underneath, and actually he's not. And the truth is, I think what Dan was just brilliant at doing was being able to do both, being able to go, actually, this man can be really, really deeply unpleasant, but he is also not a complete and utter villain, and he has suffered in this situation. And I think, you know, that's a tough thing right now for someone to be able to do convincingly. And he gives a terrific performance in that final episode. I think it's one of the best performances I've worked with, I think.
Yeah, no, that performance in that final scene like genuinely got me quite choked up at the moment. And one of the other, you know, family relationships I want to talk about is their relationship with their son, Frank, you know, and Matthew, who plays him so brilliantly, because I know that you worked with British Sign Language consultants, not just when you were on set, but also in the development and the writing process to make sure that those details were authentic and that it wasn't just, you know, bringing someone in as a vehicle and to create tension in their marriage and to talk about the type of parent that they are. And so I wanted to ask you about kind of like the way that you wanted to approach that character, and also, you know, working with Matthew, who was a first-time actor, and how you kind of like shepherded him through his performance on set together.
Yeah, sure. I mean, he was just terrific, Matthew. Like, as a first-time, like, he couldn't have been more of a pro, could he, Bill? Like, it's amazing. You know, he was he turned up and he delivered. It was amazing.
Yeah, he was just a normal kid. He just wanted to get it done, get away, go and see his mates, and he had that sort of healthy boredom around the filming, which I think is a wonderful quality. And I would be more disturbed by a child who wanted to stay there and do 10 more takes. And I think his sort of like you know, get this done energy, I've got better things to do, really helped with the role. And I think the handling of everything was well, I hope we did it quite well. We had a number of guys on set signing for and interpreting for all of us, and you know, I think it felt like a very easy process, and I hope that was a shared experience. Is that fairly?
Yeah, originally we wanted to explore the idea of them having a deaf child, not because we wanted to, you know, not because the show, in a way, because the show wasn't about a deaf child. Like, you know, he's just a child who happens to be deaf. And that came from sort of me knowing a few deaf people and thinking, you don't really ever see this on television, and that's odd. And so I was interested in, what does that look like? How would that be? And then, of course, you start thinking of character elements of it. You start thinking, I bet Cobb would actually learn sign language really, really well. I bet that would be something he'd take great pride in, you know, and that would be part of his character. And I bet Suzie would be more somebody who relied on lip reading a little bit more. And and she would quite like the fact that her son could read her lips really well and knew her expressions really well, and therefore might become a little bit lazier with the sign language. So you start to then develop, what are the character implications of this? What does that do to the relationships? And you find that it's much more interesting and than not making that choice. So we obviously brought in a lot of people to talk to about it, who were great, and lots of unexpected things, lots of stories of how being deaf had helped them as children to get away with stuff, you know, and sort of be mischievous. And I thought, oh, that's a really good angle, you know. What if he's quite mischievous, you know, and just we just sort of learned a lot about it, and sort of found that it worked quite well to just fold into the family. So we were kind of thrilled with how it turned out, and also that we got an actor quite as good as Matthew, who has a very, very expressive face. And we sort of wanted a kind of, we wanted a child that was clearly a little bit manifesting the problems between their parents, but without that being too obvious. And he, as an actor, was able to express that really well, and that's purely to do with his performance, not to do with anything else.
In a different direction, I also was really fascinated by and interested by the way that you play around with tone and genre within the show, and the pacing really feeds into that. And, you know, again, it's like one moment we're kind of having a musical moment, next moment is very kind of like deep emotional drama. And so it's interesting kind of structurally how you thought about the different genres, the different tones that you could bring into it, and how you would work with that to make sure that it does flow seamlessly and it does really work as you connect between them in scenes.
Yeah, flow is always an issue, but when I knew that we wanted to explore different genres. Part of what you do with that is just watch a lot of them, absorb a lot of them. Fear particularly is the strongest example of that, where we thought a lot about Polanski, we thought a lot about Hitchcock. That's episode 3. We just, you know, in a way, I picture the series as being a splash of different, very strong colors, or all in order. You know, that denial is blue, anger is red. They're all just sort of splashes of really, really strong colors. I think you can get away with that if you have a protagonist who is pulling you through all of them. So I think the show could only work in that way if it was very much from one person's point of view, because then you have a consistency and a flow. I don't think you could have a sort of ensemble piece really that did that. It would feel very arch. So what you're doing is you're literally going through these emotional stages inside somebody's head. So that is what gives you the sense of flow. And also the fact that it's Billie. I think there aren't many actors who are as emotionally accessible and also recognizable and familiar to us as Billie. So I think that also allowed me to get away with a little bit more structurally, because you always knew coming back to Billie's face, you know, and I think that helps a great deal.
Yeah. And Billie, did you find in a lot of those scenes, particularly when it's kind of a fantasy sequence or a dream sequence and you're breaking the fourth wall, that you had to cognizantly think about how far you could kind of push that performance, the way that you could really heighten it, but still kind of grounding it in who she is as a character emotionally at the same time? Or did you find that the writing just really lent itself to exactly what it required from your character in those moments?
All of that felt really natural, and again, it's would be a testament to Lucy's writing and also working from the ground up on the show. It just was there when we started filming. We didn't have to do masses rehearsals or prep in that way. I because it's something I really wanted to do with the show, for the show, always give, leaning into the weirder moments, the slightly heightened moments, that stuff that I personally love to watch and I think is missing from so many things. That was very exciting for me as an actor to play, and therefore it just felt easier to sort of move between the modes.
I thought you were really great. Do you remember, Bill, like in episode 4 in Shame, when we were shooting a bit of a sex scene in a car, and you said, and I think you said at one point, at this point, I want to do an impression of the actress playing my mother in this, because it's like a fantasy sequence in my own head. And she's like, so I want to do the accent of the woman who plays my mother. And I was like, knock yourself out, like go for it.
Yeah.
But it was like taking those sorts of weird fantasy imaginative leaps becomes possible when you're in fantasy worlds, stuff that only certain people would get. And that that's a bit like you might do more in theatre, actually, absurdist theatre, where you kind of go, I'm going to make this very, very strong choice.
Also, the character is quite hysterical, and so it didn't feel like such a leap to do something quite abstract. I think with this idea that she's completely lost sense of who she is and is sort of flailing around in this identity crisis, she's someone who can be a number of people, but it all feels quite hot and hysterical, and that worked really well for me. I really enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm. And for both of you, going through the experience of making the show and kind of like looking back reflectively on it at this point, I was interested in asking both of you how you feel that it's really evolved your craft as storytellers, creators, and artists. Perhaps starting with you, Lucy.
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day. I think it's made me a better writer. I think it's made me a better writer mostly because of Billie, actually, because I have I have a tendency to start from a thematic place, which I think is good. I think is it's why the episodes are all like they are, and it sort of inspires me. But I think it's dangerous to stay in that thematic place, particularly with screen, because I just don't think screen really rewards it. Theatre a little bit more, But I think screen really wants truth from you. Like, it doesn't want you to give stuff. It doesn't want you to go like, here are my ideas, which theatre can do a bit. It wants to take stuff, and you know, you have to be prepared for it to be, for there to be quite a lot of blood on the page. It's a phrase I use a lot. And I think what was very good about working on this show is that Billie is someone who I trust a lot as a friend and as a person. So when that person says to you, listen, I don't think you're being completely honest in this moment, or I don't think you're saying the most truthful, interesting thing in this moment, I think you're maybe doing something a bit clever, or doing something a bit TV, you listen to that person because they care about you and they only want you to do well. It's not like there's another agenda there. So I think that made me better, even though I think it also made me quite tired. Like, there's a certain kind of writing you can do that is guts out writing, and there's only so much of it you can do because your guts fall out. And so this was that. It was that sort of writing. But I think sometimes that's what it takes if you really, really want to affect people. So I think this is maybe the most emotional piece I've ever written, and a lot of that is thanks to Billie.
And how about for you, Billie, in terms of acting, and the way that you feel that it evolved your craft from playing this role?
Well, I think having been very heavily involved in, you know, not so much the writing but the creating of the stories with Lucy in those early stages, I've learned so much about what that takes and what makes it good, and it's something I'm really interested in. So in that way, it's been an enormous education for me, and I feel so fulfilled by that experience. And what's really satisfying for me about this show, which slightly deviates from the question, but what I find amazing about it is that I thought that maybe this was just a show for me and Lucy. Like, I feel like our
indulgently.
Yeah, probably, yeah, but I sort of hoped and longed for other women to like connect with it. But I don't think, I thought, oh, people will enjoy this because it moves really fast and it's quite entertaining, and it's, yeah, there are good jokes, and I would say it's quite funny. I didn't expect to have this sort of outpour of connection with some of the sort of the female themes and the sort of cost of being a woman, and I feel really moved by that in a way I really didn't expect. And so if anything, it sort of makes me go, no, I must sort of trust my instincts on that, or you should as well, Lucy. I think the quest to do really honest work, at the risk of maybe the characters being unlikable or the world being hysterical, or I think it was a risk worth taking this time.
Mm-hmm. Well, it definitely feels like it paid off in terms of watching it. And thank you so much to both of you for taking time to dive so in depth on the process and the journey of making the show.
Thank you.